Hello, everybody. This is Scott Davis with Stonebranch. I'm thrilled to have you joining us here on the second session, second session of Stonebranch Online. Today, we're going to be talking through 5 practical ways to automate jobs across cloud environments. We've got a lot of cool speakers today, a lot of cool use cases. We're going to do some demonstrations. We're going to hear some customer stories. And all in all, it's going to be a really cool session. So today, we've got, like I said, some great speakers. First, I'll talk a little bit through the setup of cloud automation orchestration, what it is, but then we'll pass it over to Leah Deltundris, who is the Enterprise Data Intelligence Architect at HCA Healthcare. And then we'll do some demos with Kartik, and then we'll pass it over to Gurlath Brill, who is the Infra Architect over at Achmea. Both Leah and Gurlath have some great stories to share, and Kartik's got some practical demos that he's going to show as well. So with that said, I say we jump in. First, in the context of the cloud, we're not just talking cloud automation at the end of the day. I know we call it that, but the world has turned hybrid. We've gone from having everything in on-premises data centers, and now the world's almost divided. You have a whole bunch of stuff that's still on-prem, and you have a whole bunch of stuff that's in the cloud. And whether it's on the cloud in a SaaS application or a platform like Google Cloud Platform or Amazon Web Services, AWS or Azure, all the services that are involved there, there's really a mix that goes back and forth. So as an enterprise, the real goal is to be able to orchestrate things that are on-prem and in the cloud. We're focusing on the cloud today, but also how you can connect what's on-prem to the cloud. And you'll see some cool use cases around that. So first, if you've joined us for any of our prior sessions, you'll notice that this is a pretty consistent slide we show. And what it really says is, hey, there's automation now that's happening across your hybrid cloud, your multi-cloud, and your on-prem services. And typical business that doesn't have a solution like the Universal Automation Center has a very fragmented and siloed automation approach. They'll do some automation using sort of inbuilt job schedulers, think cron, think Windows tasks, those sorts of things, but you can't really schedule anything outside of just the application those are in. Then some businesses are using open source schedulers. This is very prevalent in the data world where they're able to get something for free, they build it, and then it's really limited to time-based automation. You can't do much in the moment or anything on event-based, or it's very limited what you can do. Additionally, the time at which maybe the developer, the data person builds that scheduler using open source, they try to flip it over to ops, and ops is like, hold on, we don't want to use open source schedulers. So there becomes this challenge of getting collaboration truly done in a tool that everybody's blessed. Next on the list, you have these cloud schedulers, and they work great if you're staying just inside of that cloud provider's ecosystem. So AWS has something called Lambda. They have some other scheduling type tools. And if you're just doing something in that tool, it works wonderful. But if you need to connect to something outside of that tool, automate another cloud service or anything on-prem, they become minimal. So you get this vendor lock-in that you need to try to avoid. And then finally, there's a lot of businesses out there that have these what would traditionally be called workload automation solutions. And these tools are very focused on-prem. They can't really reach the cloud. And so you become stuck with your mainframe and your distributed servers and applications being automated by one tool and then something else automating all these other tools. So that's not ideal, obviously. Gartner coined this term service orchestration and automation platforms in 2020. And the real driver of this as the evolution from what would have been known as workload automation is the idea that enterprises need to automate what's happening on-prem, in the cloud, and then really empower people with things like self-service automation, data pipeline development automation. And so SOAP was born, and there's a category of solutions out there that are included in this SOAP moniker, and Stonebranch's Universal Automation Center is one of them. So what can you do with a SOAP? our Universal Automation Center being a SOAP, really you get to this orchestration benefit. So you start being able to automate the automators. You can tap into job schedulers. You can tap into open source tools or replace them. You can tap into the cloud schedulers, and you can run everything on-prem through your old scheduler. You can use our scheduler, but really you're looking at an orchestration layer that goes above all the tools you're using. So you can see one centralized view and manage that view across all the businesses. You avoid vendor lock-in because you can actually connect what's happening in AWS to Azure with this orchestration layer. You are able to use the tools that you want to use and the ones that you have existing, right? And you can add tools as you go, because the beauty of a proper orchestration solution is that it can connect to anything. And then finally, what you really get out of an orchestration solution is this idea of democratizing automation, or being able to empower others in the organization with automation. And some of the demos we'll show throughout Stonebranch Online are very focused on that topic because it's such a big one these days. When we talk about service orchestration automation, this session is about the cloud. So if you look at the types of areas that you're typically automating with service orchestration and an automation platform, cloud, infrastructure as a service, and really a lot of these tools all have, or a lot of these categories all have things that go through the cloud. So it may be that you're doing a data pipeline, but you still need to automate cloud infrastructure, and you still need to automate cloud-based tools along with the on-prem tools. Or it could be that you're just really focused on the cloud and want to automate stuff just in the cloud, right? Cloud service provider SaaS applications. So the net is a service orchestration automation platform is going to go across the whole spectrum of this and help you sort of break down those silos of automation. For today's discussion, we're going to go and talk about some of the cloud-specific use cases. And I'll just run through these briefly, but we'll go in more detail as we get through the entire presentation. So first, all the way to the left here, is you have multi-cloud data transfer. This is, in a very real way, moving data back and forth between cloud providers in the cloud. So a tool like the Universal Automation Center allows you to stream data between AWS and Azure, or AWS and Google, or AWS and your SaaS application of choice. In the middle, just to the right of that, you have multi-cloud orchestration. Of course, there's a whole bunch of applications that are out there, a whole bunch of SaaS applications, services within the larger cloud providers that you need to run automation in, and you need to be able to do it across all of those providers, not just a single one. So we'll talk through some of that as well. We have a use case that we'll talk about. Then you have hybrid cloud data transfer. This is the idea of moving data from the mainframe or your distributed data center up into the cloud and back. And so we have a number of ways to do that. We'll go through a use case on that as well. Next on the list is simplified cloud migrations. At the end of the day, a lot of companies and enterprises are in this middle of moving to the cloud. They'll use terms like cloud first, or they'll use terms like cloud only, right? And what we see from research we've done in the market is that the majority of businesses are in this sort of hybrid IT environment where they have some stuff on-prem and they have stuff into the cloud, maybe with a goal of going to the cloud. Well, part of this is being able to automate what's in the cloud and on-prem at the same time because of that transition phase. And so you see a lot of that. In addition, you can't have a conversation about the cloud without having a conversation about containers and microservices. So we have a number of customers where they'll drop an agent, the universal agent, into a container and then be able to do a whole bunch of different things, move data back and forth from applications in the cloud or on-prem. And that's another specific use case that we see in the market and people doing with the Universal Automation Center. And then finally on this list is cloud infrastructure automation. And when we're talking about cloud infrastructure automation, there's really a couple different ways to do it. With the UAC, you can go and create a workflow that spins up an S3 bucket or some EC2 compute power directly from the UAC. But usually your large enterprise will have a whole host of tools in place, whether it be Terraform or Puppet or Chef or Ansible. And so the other side of it for us is being able to orchestrate all those tools to spin up power so that you have it centrally controlled. You can use templates that help you automate all of that. So those are the use cases. And what I'm going to do now is flip it over to Latundris. And Leia's again with HCA Healthcare. She's got a beautiful vision for what HCA is going to do. And she'll pass it back after she's done. Thanks, Leia.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. Super excited to be here. Again, Leia Latundris. I am an enterprise data architect for HCA Healthcare, reporting to our Chief Technology Officer. Some of the roles in my career that I've had the privilege of serving, I started with global outsourcing. I moved over and did some revenue cycle services with our Parallon teams, and then ultimately some identity and access management, all preparing me for this enterprise level role specific to data and the security of our data. Stonebranch has been a long-term partner with HCA, automating many critical processes, particularly in our revenue cycle space, but it doesn't stop there. Across many of our service lines throughout the journey or my career with the organization. I'm going to call out a couple of transformational journeys that we are on. One being obviously the journey to the cloud, the reason for today's webinar. Some of the guiding principles we have around our journey to the cloud. And in that decision tree and in our strategy, how are we handling our data estate or the magnitude of our data when we think about securing it in a cloud environment and moving it around in a secure way? So we'll step through first a little bit about HCA as an organization. These numbers are available on our public website. I took this from our 2021 annual impact report. As you can see here, 182 acute care hospitals, 35 million plus patient encounters, 8.5 million ED visits annually, close to 100,000 of our nursing workforce, as well as about half of that in our physician provider volume and population. So with the middle of COVID, we spun up as a strategic pillar what we know internally as the Care Transformation and Innovation team. That team is really meant to embrace innovation as a way of life. Those are our innovators, our data scientists that are delivering outcomes in more impactful ways, harnessing the power of our data sets. Also in 2021, we had a complementary investment with our Google Cloud partnership. Here we need to realize a platform rich with features and capabilities that are going to provide our innovators, our care transformation team, with the speed and agility that they demand, that our business demands, of advanced analytics and machine learning. I know many of you, myself, we've had personal experiences, and so it's not hard to stay connected to the mission. When you think about what we've done in 2021 with CT&I, Care Transformation and Innovation, those are our people, right? Our innovators. You combine that with a platform such as the Google Cloud partnership. You combine the people and the technology, and that's how we are delivering on that mission. And I'll use this as a plug for HCA Healthcare, IT, and business employees. Really, truly, above all else, we are committed to the care and improvement of human life. Bottom line. So I'm going to take the next slide to step through some of our guiding principles, some of our challenges when we think about the journey to the cloud. And when we started years ago, this was not a strategy that said, let's move everything, right? In fact, you have to do a little bit more due diligence when you think about the size of our infrastructure, the size and breadth of our unique business services. What kind of inventory do you start with, really? And our approach was really looking at our critical systems, critical to our core business, and then shining a light on the end-of-life technologies when you think about our application suites. So again, I'll plug thousands of unique applications, servers. You can imagine, and arguably, probably one of the richest data sets, clinical data sets in the country. So the objective of that is to really, how do we look at our critical apps? How do we modernize? How do we consolidate? How do we reduce the complexities? And maybe save a little bit of money. So guiding principles here, obviously PaaS and platform as a service offerings are always better than infrastructure as a service offerings, generally speaking. We use the guiding principle of incorporating PaaS into our architecture and our design when we modernize or go through that app rationalization. Typically, we are not defaulting to infrastructure as a service, but there are some compelling reasons, either from a technical or a financial need to do so, but that would be our least preferenced model. Our shop is very third-party driven, and so where there is a software as a service offering, obviously that's an area that we want to invest in. Going back to refactoring or modernizing our application suites, we're really invested in making strong recommendations of modernizing through API-driven capabilities. We want to automate any of our deployment methods. We want to take advantage of that advanced compute in the cloud. And it also has to be highly available because we're a clinical hospital setting. We want to take advantage of those composable microservices, right? So the challenge for us becomes, how do you orchestrate that? On-prem, in one cloud, or many clouds as we are finding ourselves. So at the end of the day, all the tech is great, right? But we've got to trust it. It has to be secure because of the sensitivity of the data that we're housing. But most importantly, it has to meet our mission. It has to improve the patient experience and definitely improve the patient safety outcomes. So I'll switch over a little bit to one major component of our journey to the cloud. Always involves data. Every conversation goes back to, what are we doing with our data? How can we make it accessible? How can we unlock or harness the power of our data, deliver it to the innovators, and ultimately drive business value? So as a consumer of data products, I have generalized some common themes that I've seen throughout the years. One, it's hard to find our data that we need. As a product owner, a former product owner, trying to locate the right view or database that has the data that I'm looking for to execute, say, an analytical dashboard for our executive teams. Or moving into some of our service offerings where we need to deliver products or automation in many of our downstream systems. Once we find that data set, how can I trust it? How do I know that there are not transformations that have occurred that would create slight nuances against the system of record? So I have to be able to find it. I have to be able to trust it. And ultimately, that drives the objective of what we mean by data estate planning. I have to flatten the playing field and democratize that data set so that it's accessible, it's discoverable, usable, regardless of where that workload is running. And it's got to have effective data quality and a really good solid data governance around that. So some of our non-negotiables, and it's a combination of technical and business requirements. What do we have to have in order to serve that up to our innovators? It's got to be self-service. Self-service is key. Democratizing that and making it easily accessible. I can have a great platform all day long, but if I don't have the data that's discoverable to really drive our machine learning, it's no value. Something else that we're discovering as a part of this journey is that all of our data assets really need what we are calling an accountability owner, or the industry may call a data steward. How do we ensure the accountability, the quality of our data products so that they're pristine, they're clean for downstream systems, automation, advanced analytics, machine learning, whatever the case may be? So treating that as a cultural shift for product owners such as myself, ensuring that there's high quality data and treating that data as a product of itself, an output of that system of record or that system of experience is very key to us. So how do you pull a lot of this off, right? There's a common theme between our journey to the cloud and our data estate planning. We have to have a way to orchestrate, meta orchestrate, regardless of where that workload sits, regardless of where that data asset is going, in order to serve our data science community, our innovators, our care transformation organizations. So being cloud agnostic is incredibly important to us. Definitely some of the challenges that we've experienced along this way are understanding the cultural shifts, the organizational impact that this may create when we really start to think about data as a product output of our systems of truth. But a lot of the use cases and a lot of the demonstrations you'll see today will support that. So Scott, I'm going to turn it back over to you and we'll get into some demos in just a moment.
Thanks, Leah. So very cool. What we're going to talk about next is multi-cloud orchestration. And this very much ties back to Leah's use case, right? Where there's public clouds and multiple providers, there's SaaS applications. And the idea behind this is, you're connecting the automation layer to orchestrate across all of these different services. You're creating real-time workflows that break down the silos. It doesn't matter, to what Leah said earlier, where the workload runs. You're able to connect a workflow that becomes transparent to the end user. And you, as a central orchestrator, can decide which platform is the right one to run something. Could be based off of cost, could be based off of functionality, but in essence, you get templates and ways to make those decisions. It also allows you to choose the best of breed service. So the thing that we keep seeing as a theme is people are trying to fight this idea of vendor lock-in. So you use a scheduler that's a cloud scheduler, you're locked into that vendor. If you were to leave it to the cloud service providers, very much like we saw in the late 90s and early 2000s, vendors would love it if you bought everything from them. And that's kind of the way that cloud providers are set up right now, because they're not interoperable with each other very easily. So an orchestration solution like ours allows that interoperability, allows you to move data back and forth. And then finally, it's just that central place to automate, which is sort of the theme of this whole session. So to bring this to life, I'm going to pass it over to Kartik, who will walk you through an actual demo within the Universal Automation Center of what this might look like in a practical scenario. So Kartik, why don't you take us away?
Thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. I'm Kartik Mohan. I'm a solution engineer here at Stonebranch. I'm based out of our Frankfurt office in Germany. So today I'm going to handle the demo sessions for you as a part of a Stonebranch online session. So as a part of my demo today, I'm going to show you two scenarios. The first scenario is I'm going to show how we can orchestrate the movement of data between multiple cloud environments and also between SaaS applications, which can be running in public or private clouds. Yeah, so for this first example, so we have configured a data movement where the user will be uploading the files to an AWS S3 storage. And as soon as there is a file available in the S3 storage, it will be picked up by a remote file monitor, which will then move the files to multiple locations, one to the Azure, and then from there to Power BI and stuff. So let me show you the configuration of the workflow. So in this slide, you can see how the workflow has been configured. First, the file will be uploaded to S3 by an user. As soon as this S3 bucket has the file, it will trigger an SNS webhook, which will in turn will notice this Azure environment where it will notice that a new file is available to be processed. Once the Azure picks up the file, it will be pushed to Power BI dashboard, where it will be pushed onto your analytics dashboard, where the end user can make sense of the new data which is available for them to use. Yes. So let me start by sharing my screen now so that you can see the workflow in action. So yes, sharing it, switching to our controller. I hope everyone can see our controller here. So these are the two tasks which I have configured as a part of our data transfer activity, multi-cloud orchestration. So here, what I have did, I have configured an S3 upload data. So showcasing one more capability of uploading files to S3 storage buckets, which we have in place. And once this is done, we can see this workflow, which is getting kickstarted as soon as the file arrives in place. I can also show you the workflow when we go into the execution of this workflow. So let me go to the activity monitor. You can see there is no activity in place as of now. So I will launch this workflow task so that the file transfer can happen. As soon as the file transfer is finished, we can see the workflow getting fired. So we can see the file is being uploaded. As soon as the file is being uploaded, you can see the workflow running. So this workflow trigger has been done by the AWS SNS. So let's go to the workflow. So here the workflow you can see, we are trying to copy the file from S3 to Azure. Let me show you the task in detail. So here we have it. So here we are trying to move the file from S3 storage to Microsoft Azure Blob Storage. And here you can see the source bucket on the S3 and the target storage on the Microsoft Azure side. Yes. So I kept this task on held. Let me release this task so that the workflow can happen. So as soon as the workflow is kickstarted, it will move the files from one cloud storage to the other. So here we have a Slack and Teams approval. This is part of our self-service capabilities. Let me open the Slack channel for you guys so that we can see the approval notification there. So here we have it. So here you can see this approval notification, which is asking before the file can be pushed to Power BI for making sets. Yes. So I'm approving it. The same can be done from our Teams channel as well. We have separate integrations for that. As soon as we are done, I'm going back to the controller. We can see the task finished its execution. Now we can see the Power BI data stuff is running. So here what will happen is the Power BI data refresh will happen. Here, the new file which we uploaded will take into place. Before this thing, I can go here. You can see the Power BI dashboard. Here, we just have one product. As soon as this data refresh happens, we should be able to see multiple products available for the end user to see the sales forecast, like the sales input in these particular regions for various products. Yeah. So now we can see the Power BI dashboard got into success. Now just we are waiting on an email task to finish. So this will in turn send me a link. Let me bring my inbox to you just a sec. So if I bring my mailbox, we can see it here. Here we have a new email with the link to the Power BI dashboard. So if I click on this, we can see the new dashboard with multiple products available for the user. So earlier it was one product, now we have three products. I can show you the old dashboard, which was like this. And now we have more data in place so that we have orchestrated the entire data movement from multiple cloud infrastructure to the SaaS application so that we can leverage the data which we have in place. So this is one example of how we orchestrate the movement of data between multiple environments. Similar way, you can use our solution to leverage lots of data movement in your organization. Thank you. Back to you, Scott.
Good. Thanks, Kartik. And we flip back over to the slides here. So next on the list, we've got Gerlof Brill. He's an infra architect at Achmea. And Gerlof's got just a cool story. They've been with Stonebranch for an awful long time, so they're fairly mature in their hybrid strategy. And I'll look forward to what Gerlof has to share. So Gerlof, off to you.
Thank you, Scott. I would like to introduce Achmea to you and the things we do within Achmea with your product. So let's start with introducing myself. I'm an infrastructure architect, one of the infrastructure architects within Achmea. But my main focus is integration and workload automation, where we're discussing here, and data transfer is one of the topics within my domain. But let me first introduce Achmea, the company where I'm working for. Achmea is in the Netherlands a large company. We're an insurance company, one of the largest in the Netherlands, with over 10 million customers in the Netherlands alone. We have also more than 5 million healthcare customers. We recently shifted our focus. We are not a company that is listed at the stock exchange. We are privately held, and we shifted our focus to sustainability. So our motto is now sustainable living together, which we are trying to achieve within the Netherlands. But we are not only in the Netherlands. We have more than 30,000 people working for Achmea in the Netherlands, over different offices in the Netherlands. But we are also outside the Netherlands. We have offices in Canada, Australia, Greece, Slovakia, and Turkey. On the bottom side, you see a lot of brands we are offering to the people in the Netherlands and abroad. And we have a long history. We started, the company started in 1830, more than 200 years ago, as a cooperation of farmers who put together money to help each other when they are in trouble. So from that time, we grew and grew, and we are a company of mergers. So we have a lot of different applications in the company. We had to rationalize a lot of different infrastructure. We had to rationalize. So I come back to that a bit later, but it gives you a bit context on the company Achmea. When looking at trends and technologies, we shifted the focus a couple of years ago. We had, because we are a company of mergers, every company had their own data center. We did move to 2 data centers more than a decade ago. And the last couple of years, we shifted the focus to cloud first. That means we are moving the stuff from our on-prem data centers wherever possible to the cloud, to Azure. Azure is our main cloud provider. So all the infrastructure as a service and platform as a service comes from Microsoft Azure. We have extensions as SaaS offerings, of course, we have. But we are now moving the things we have on-prem to the cloud. And to give an impression, our portal infrastructure is already in the cloud. We did lift and shift our SAP landscape. We have a large application landscape of SAP. We have shifted that to the cloud as well. We have a large Pega systems environment, workflow and case management environment. We are now moving that to the cloud. So we are in the midst of a great transition. What will stay behind in these data centers, that are the legacy infrastructure. For us, that is our mainframe. We are getting rid of the mainframe in the next 2 years. So we are moving all the applications that are still on there to application in the cloud. And we are getting rid of our iSeries platform because we are not going to move that as well to the cloud. In the middle, you see the Achmea Cloud Exchange. That is our connectivity place to connect everything together, our data center to the cloud, to the people, customers, business partners, etc. Well, that's all I want to say on this slide. One final remark: the requirement we had from our board of directors is we had to move away from Azure in 1 year. So that's a big challenge if you want to get rid from Azure to whatever other cloud. The requirement is you have to be able to do that in 1 year. Now moving to the workload automation landscape. As I mentioned, we have a lot of applications. When we started Stonebranch, we selected Stonebranch because we had a lot of schedulers in place. We had a lot of data transfer solutions in place. And we want to move to one single solution who does cover both data transfer and all workload automation stuff. So we would be able to create a workflow in which we create a file, in which we transfer the file, and in which we want to process the file. And Stonebranch did address that in their solution. So we started with UAC more than 10 years ago. We have a lot of agents on-prem in our data center, more than 250 in production only. For us, that's a larger number. And we are moving one by one these agents to the cloud. And now in the cloud, we already have 75 agents available, more or less because of the move from the SAP landscape to Azure. These agents should had to migrate. But on-prem, we have the central controller, of course, the OMS share, and our database, our SQL, my MS SQL database, and of course the agent on each different server where we want to do things. Also on the file transfer gateway, in which we transfer files to the outside world, to our business partners or other parts we had to exchange files with. On the Azure part, we have agents on VMs and with or without local storage. And we have agents in namespaces in OpenShift. In our containerized world, we use OpenShift as our Kubernetes environment. We have now agents deployed in OpenShift as well as sidecar containers. I will come to that a bit later, but that's the way we technically arranged it. We have an agent infrastructure in the cloud as well, and we are controlling all the agents from the central controller in our on-prem environments, still in our prem environment. And you may imagine that we want to move that central controller to Azure as well in the near future. We also have agentless connections. On the right-hand side, you see Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Lake, Azure Blob Storage, and Azure Files. We are connecting to that as well. For the agentless part, for the agent without storage, we're moving the file or delivering the files to Azure Files so that we can still get hold of that file in the VM who wants to address that file or process that file. But we're also moving files to Blob Storage, Data Lake, and we are triggering pipelines in Data Factory. So that's the landscape we are in. To give an impression on how large is your install base now, we have over 1 million task instances last week, and we have more than 20,000 task definitions in our database. Just to give you an impression. Then I will move to my final slide, in which I give you some scenarios we're using within Achmea. We have, of course, what we had already for more than 10 years, our internal data transfers on the left side, VM to VM with local storage or without local storage, so using file shares. We do that for years now, using Universal Data Mover and Universal Agents. We also added to that the B2B data transfers, meaning file transfers to external partners, business partners. It's for us, it's another enterprise integration pattern. We have a number of them, and we try to use that both on-prem and extend that to the cloud, to Azure, so that we can still hold to the same data, so to the same integration patterns. We can use them both on-prem and in Azure. So what did we do to extend it? Agents in Azure, of course, triggering of the Azure Data Factory pipelines. I realized last week on the Innovation Europe in Amsterdam that, in fact, we are now creating our data pipelines there, just small pieces, but if you put them together, you have your complete data pipeline. We are developing it with the Stonebranch because we have some minor challenges there regarding the security area and the specific requirements we have within Achmea. And they are all inter-cloud data transfer based, as shown by Kartik already. Last but not least, we are now also moving fast to containers. We have two options for that. Either we deploy a sidecar container in the pod of the application wants to do something with files, or, and both we have in production now, or we deploy the UA image on a separate pod, a single pod within the same namespace who deals with the file transfer both delivery as file monitoring. File transfer with workloads I already mentioned to you in my previous slide. We do that from an VM which is located deployed in our on-prem environment, but we can address the blob storage or the data factory from within that. So that's, I think, all I want to address here, Scott. So over to you.
Thanks, Gerlof. So just looking at this slide, it's pretty phenomenal. They're moving data real time or in batch, depending on the circumstance, internally, externally, between on-prem and the cloud, and then between clouds. And what we're going to hone in on for today's presentation is the next part is just this whole hybrid cloud or multi-cloud data transfer. So within this, you sort of have that hybrid cloud environment where you're transferring data with containers, and you're doing it, as Gerlof talked about, as a sidecar container. Obviously, we do that for Achmea, but we do it for other vendors as well. So what Kartik's going to show us next is this data transfer that's happening in the cloud, right? The streaming of data back and forth between cloud service providers. And really what you're doing in this sort of multi-cloud data transfer is moving data between public cloud providers, or of course, in a hybrid environment, the private cloud. But Kartik's going to focus us on the latter. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Kartik to do the next demo.
Hey, Scott. Thank you. Hey everyone. I'm back. So as a part of this demo, I'm going to demonstrate how we can move files from multiple public and private cloud environments, also from moving files from your on-prem systems to your cloud-based storage locations. So as a part of this demo, I have set up uploading files from a local disk to Gen 2 Microsoft Azure Data Lake. So the reason why we choose Gen 2 data lake storage is like we can also support this directory structure, which will be provided as a part of Gen 2 data lake storage. Meaning, if you have a subdirectory structure in your on-prem solutions, on-prem storage structures, we can move along all the files along with the directory structure to Gen 2 data lake storages. And as a part of this demo, I will also show you how we can monitor data arrival in the Gen 2 data lake storage, and based upon the file arrival, we can kickstart a workflow or a task, which will in turn make use of the task, which will make use of the data available as a part of this file upload and stuff. And apart from this, I will also show you how we can move files from one cloud storage to other cloud storage, and also we can show how we can sync between an on-prem storage solution to a cloud storage solution, in this case Linux to SharePoint. Yeah, so let me move on to the next slide. So this is the solutions which we have in place. You can move files from various cloud source, like cloud or on-prem storage source, to a different target which are available in cloud or as well as on-prem storage solutions. So the main things to focus on here is we are not storing the data in between anywhere while moving the data from source to the target. We are streaming the data from source to the target directly. And we also support objects like listing the objects, listing the data available in any of these stores and target locations, where we can also copy or move, or we can also remove the objects from the storage places. And we also use the process is extremely fast, meaning you don't have to do anything. Everything is running in parallel. Yeah. So let me start sharing my screen once again so that we can see everything in action. So as a part of this workflow, I have configured this dashboard from where you can monitor all the things happening as a part of this demo. So first and foremost thing is I will start this monitor, which will be monitoring Azure data lakes storage, where whenever there is a file, which will be monitoring for a file to arrive. Whenever there is a file arrives in this Gen 2 storage, data lake, process will be triggered. So in this case, I am moving this using this task, which is copying a file from AWS to Azure. So here you can see it. So we are using the storage type of Amazon S3 as the source, and we are using the target as the data lake Gen 2 storage. And we are moving the files from this place in this bucket from the source, and then moving to the data lake under this report section. Let me launch this task. As soon as we launch this task, we should see changes in the dashboard. So here you can see the task got into success, copying of this data. As soon as this task finished its execution, moving the file is moved from source to target, we can see another task gets kickstarted. In this case, an SAP task, which will be using the data available on the Azure data storage. Yes, let's give it a minute so that the SAP process can finish its execution, and then I will move on to it. So if we go here and if I retrieve the output, I can see the SAP output available for the users. Yes. So this is how. So similar way you can kickstart a workflow or any number of tasks using a file monitor running on a cloud storage. Yes. And the next one would be this one. So before moving into this demo, I will show you what we have in place basically. So just a minute. I will launch the putty once again. So here we have it. I hope everyone can see the text available here. So what I do is I will print the path. It's in home Stonebranch. I will move to a directory where I have configured the files in place to this thing to happen. So here, if we go, we have three directories: orders, reports, and sales. And if I move to orders here, so we can see the number of files available here. We have orders2 and .txt and orders.txt. What I will do is I will create a dynamic, I'll create a new file here. Txt, and I will save it. So now we have three files here. And if I move to my cloud storage here in the demo sync, you can see the orders. We have the same directory here: orders, reports, and sales. And then let me do a refresh. So we have 0 items here. We have 2 items here and 1 item here. So when I launch this next task, we should see a sync of all the files from the Linux system to the SharePoint folder here. Yes, so I'll come back here and I will launch this task. So as soon as I launched it, we can see the task is running here. And once it's finished its execution, when I move to the SharePoint folder, here we have 3 items in place. When I go here, you can see the date and timestamp which is available here. So you can see it was created a minute ago, and then you can see the file details here in place. Yeah. So likewise, instead of doing a manual file transfer or stuff, you can also put up a file monitor on the Linux storage. As soon as the file monitor picks up the file, we can kickstart the syncing of data between your on-prem solution on the cloud-based solutions. Yes, back to you, Scott.
Thanks, Carter. So what I think's interesting about this is the fact that you don't have to use any intermediary storage when you're passing files back and forth. In contrast to other methods of moving cloud data from, say, AWS to Azure, it streams, right? It's just there's nothing in between. And I had a conversation with Gerloff earlier because he has the intent to use this. He's working on getting this set up at his business, but he also uses the containerized OpenShift to move data back and forth. And so, I asked him, like, why would you do it that way or do both? And this allows the streaming, and the streaming is really good. It almost bypasses the need for containers to do some similar things. So depending on your situation, depending on which applications you're trying to run, this starts to make a lot of sense. And you can employ either method from within the Stonebranch application. So next few slides I'm going to go through kind of quick so that we can get to some Q&A. I see some nice questions piling up, which I always love to see. First, one of the other main use cases we talked about earlier in the deck was cloud infrastructure automation. This is just a visual representation of that. So in this sort of scenario, with the UAC, you can either go directly to the cloud provider and spin something up in an automated fashion based on an event trigger or based on a service ticket to ServiceNow that just spins up cloud provider stuff, and then have it automatically tear down when it's done, so you minimize the VM sprawl. But like I said earlier on, a lot of enterprises have a number of different applications that are involved when they spin up infrastructure. And so if you don't want to do it directly through the UAC, or you're more advanced than going directly through just a scheduling tool, you may have Ansible or Terraform or Chef or Puppet, or any number of applications are involved along that pipeline. Now, many companies use open source tools to orchestrate each of those tools, but you can and should use a enterprise scheduler, as many of our customers are, to run that orchestration and manage the whole thing with the log data, with the observability, with the ability to root cause and where issues happen from within our controller. And that takes us to the end of the session, and we can do some Q&A here. So maybe Leah, Gerloff, Kartik, why don't you guys turn your cameras on and people can see us chat. I'll run through the published questions. Do remember that you can go to the Q&A and add questions as we go, and we'll get through as many as we can between now and the next 4 minutes. So I'm going to go down. I saw one that I thought was interesting that I'd actually like to put out to Gerloff, and even Leah, if you have some thoughts. But what's your criteria for the data that should move to the cloud?
Well, we follow the principles within the company. We have to move everything to the cloud. So it is very simple criterion, because we have to. We're forced to move data to the cloud. Company has had that as a main focus now. So yes, we are moving everything to the cloud.
Basically everything. So
no matter the confidentiality or so.
Yeah, and so that's where people draw the line sometimes, right? Especially if it's sensitive data. You still see businesses that are like, hey, we want to keep this in the mainframe because it's perceived as not being as risky. But reality-wise, most companies are moving stuff to the cloud now, and the cloud is really secure if you make it that way. There's another question, Kartik, this might be for you. How is the approval integration with MS Teams, and is it working only in the latest version? So I know we have a number of Teams and or Slack integrations. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, Scott, I can take that question. So basically, the Teams approval tasks works with controller version 7.0 and above. So that's how it goes: 7.0, 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3 with the latest release, which was done last week. So with respect to this approval notification, you can find the task in our integration hub. When you go to integration hub, search for Teams approval, and then you should be able to find the task related to this. And in order this to work, you will need a serverless function. So the serverless function could be AWS Lambda or Azure functions as well, or maybe from Google Cloud. So we have the things in place. You can see the information needed to set up a serverless function, and then you can keep going. And if you have any issues with the setting up this task, you can always reach out to us.
Got it. Thanks, Kartik. And Kartik mentioned the integration platform. That's where we make pre-designed integrations available to the entire community. And typically they were built side by side with a customer, and then we productized them and put them out there with documentation and everything. There is another question here. I'm going to read it, and we can decide if we can answer it as a group. Can you handle change tracking and or CDC modality of source data transfer? Example, specific rows in Excel file have changed and one wants to capture and copy those changed rows rather than upload and move the whole file. So, Kartik, do you have an initial response to that? I have a thought, but I want to give you a chance from a technical standpoint to answer it.
Yes, we can do a file monitor based upon the changes in a file. We can make sure that file can be moved to a particular location, just like you asked. But if you want to make sure that it's an Excel file, and if you want to validate the changes before making the file movement, that would be a separate scenario which we have to focus on here.
Yeah,
Yep.
And so there's also, we're running a pilot actually internally where we're integrating two systems. And as one system it's actually with our integration hub, the software that runs that in the background is something called Shopware. And as Shopware, somebody orders something, we want to move that order into another system, in this case, Salesforce. And so maybe it's not specific to an Excel file, but you can even do it with an application. So this field changes, or there's a system event here, then you move that order and the data over to another system and it captures it there. And so it's not a common use case in our installed base, but I think that it's something that will become more common as people start connecting these multiple cloud-based systems. In this case, that's what we're doing. So we're building it internally, but we'll talk more about it externally as it's finalized up. Okay, we're at time. I see the questions were all answered except for benefits of using multiple cloud providers. I think that's something we can cover in another session, but we can follow up with the person who submitted that afterwards. So with that said, I'd like to thank Leah, Gerloff, and Kartik for joining us today. What a good session, some great demos, some great stories. I think back to 3 years ago when I started here at Stonebranch, and cloud was just an inkling of what we were automating. We knew we could do it. We had some specific use cases we were doing it, but now just about everybody in our installed base and every person that comes to us looking to do something is looking to automate that hybrid cloud environment. And clearly, the Universal Automation Center is squarely set to be able to do that. So if you have any questions or follow-ups, please do come back to us. So with that said, we'll see you on the next one, and thank you so much for joining.